John and Sue Day, Essex, England. On October the 27th, 1974, John Day, 33, his wife Susan, 29, and their child Kevin, who came from Aveley in Essex in southeast England, had an extremely unusual incident one night where they found they had lost 3 hours that they could not account for. The couple had been returning home after visiting her parents in Harold Hill. It was a journey that would normally have taken only 30 minutes. They left Harold Hill at 9:20 p.m, and when they arrived home, the clock on the mantelpiece was showing 12:45 a.m. In the days that followed, both had strange recurring dreams where they are laying on an operating table and being examined by strange humanoids. Eventually, the nightmares became so realistic that they were afraid to go to bed. John Day decided to contact a UFO group who gave them the name of a man called Leonard Wilder. Wilder was a dentist who was also a trained hypnotist. On Hypnosis, John Day revealed an amazing story. As he and his wife were driving home that evening in October 1974, a white light was following their car before suddenly beaming them and their car aboard a spacecraft. He found himself in a huge room and was standing beside 3 alien beings who looked about 7 feet tall and wearing silver-grey one-piece outfits that resembled body stockings. The bottom half of their faces were covered, and as they stared at him, he could see that their eyes were bright pink and there were no eyelids. They did not speak to him, but communicated telepathically, while they asked him to walk across the room, which he did, before coming to another doorway that led into another room. They all walked into the room where he could see what looked like an operating table, where they asked him to lie down. A metal arm appeared that proceeded to scan his body. 3 small squat-looking aliens appeared and started prodding him with a pen-shaped object. A short time later, his examination came to an end and he asked them if he could look around their ship, which they agreed to. He could see that all of the furniture was moulded to the walls, and on one table he saw a pile of cubes with magnets on them that he figured was a sort of game. As he finished his tour of the spaceship, a beautiful-looking woman walked in. She had golden hair and was surrounded by a grey mist. She started to walk towards him, and when he started to walk towards her, she abruptly vanished, and the next thing he knew was back in the car and driving along the road. Before the incident, John had never believed in UFOs or alien beings, but was now convinced that they existed and they were here now, but only showed themselves when they wanted to. The alien beings that he met kept telling him they were friendly, and unlike many people that had been abducted, was not affected in any negative way and had enjoyed meeting with them. The hypnotist Leonard Wilder had no doubt that John Day had been telling the truth about being hypnotized, where he had asked Day to tell him exactly what had happened. His wife Sue refused to be hypnotized and did not want to relive the experience. Later, after talking to her husband about what he'd experienced, she was able to recall something that had happened to her. When she was laying on the operating table, they painted her with a mauve liquid before washing it off. They then prodded her all over with an object that resembled a pen, where she screamed. One of the tall beings came over to her and put his hand on her forehead, and she immediately blanked out. When she awoke, they took her on a tour of the spaceship and showed her a screen and said, "This is Earth," and pointed to England. They then zoomed in and showed her where she lived. She told the beings that she did not want to go back, which they agreed to. But when she saw her husband climb into the car and saw it suddenly vanish, she changed her mind and wanted to go back. She then found herself sitting in the car with her husband. British UFO investigator Barry King was convinced that John and Susan Day had been abducted, and the description under hypnosis of what happened to them were very similar to what other abductees had described, and had no reason to doubt their story. But there is no information as to what had happened to their child throughout their ordeal, and it could be assumed that he too would have undergone a similar experience. Pat Roach, Utah, USA. Pat lived in Lehi in Utah and worked at the steel factory in Orem. Pat was a millwright that installed, maintained and repaired machinery and heavy equipment on construction sites, and at the time was the only woman licensed to make repairs on the heavy machinery. Pat Roach had 5 children, and on October the 16th, 1973, her life would be dramatically changed. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening when the 4-year-old son climbed up beside her in bed with his blanket and fell asleep. Sometime between 8 p.m. and midnight, something strange occurred in the house where 2 of her children, Bonnie aged 13 and Debbie aged 6, told her the spacemen had been in the house. Pat did not believe them and instead believed that a burglar had entered the premises. She called the police and a Sergeant Ray Edwards answered the call. He came and inspected the premises, both inside and outside in the garden, but found nothing. The family were also scared that they decided to spend the night with friends. The following morning, Sergeant Edwards filed an official report, leaving the case open and dismissed the claims of her children, who insisted the house had been invaded by spacemen. After 2 years had gone by, Pat and her children had not forgotten the incident, which they could not put out of their minds. Pat began reading about UFOs and looked at magazines that had stories about UFOs and seeing other people's experiences, and she thought there must be more to it and decided to write to the magazine Saga to ask for help. Saga was a long-running men's magazine that also published material on UFOs and the paranormal. Saga magazine ceased publication in the mid-70s. The fact that the letter she had written had mentioned spacemen, she was put in touch with Dr. James Harder from APRO, that is, Aerial Phenomena Research Organisation. Dr. Harder was a noted hypnotist who investigated alien abductions. UFO investigators believe victims suppress their memory of an abduction because they are programmed to do so. Researchers, however, feel that children stand a better chance than adults in resisting mind manipulation. The only way they may find out anyone was to be hypnotized in order to recall the events. Sarah was regressed to retrieve memories that had long been buried, and under hypnosis was able to recall that 2 aliens had been standing near her bed when she suddenly woke up. She described them as being small with large heads and were very pale with whitish faces and large eyes. This is a classic description given by many abductees. They wore silver uniforms with a tight-fitting helmet. They wore gloves and a belt with a strap that passed over the right shoulder. It was similar to the type worn by military and police officers. They then touched her on the arm, where she was then lifted up. As they were carrying her away, she could see her children attempting to fight off the aliens in their bedroom. One of the aliens looked female and wore a long skirt and had long hair that was held back by a headband. Pat was floated effortlessly into the spaceship through a hatch and did not see what the outside of the craft looked like. Now inside the craft, she was concerned about the welfare of her children. She could see the interior of the spaceship, where the walls fell away, and as she looked up at the ceiling, she could see the stars. She was then stripped and placed on a floating table, where they carried out a gynecological examination on her. There was something that looked like a TV scanner that was placed on top of her head, that went down and back up again like an eye. She was examined by someone that looked like an ordinary man who looked over 6 feet tall. She was very upset because he came towards her with a long needle, and she was angry with him, and he had no right to come into someone's home and take them. She was particularly upset with him because she didn't know where her children were. After the examination, the aliens showed us some of their technology. She was again hypnotized, where they appeared interested in her life story and her emotions. Eventually, they gave her a clothes back and told her to dress. Later, under hypnosis, her daughter Bonnie was able to recall her mother being examined by a balding human with grey hair who appeared to be helping them. She knew he was a human doctor because he had normal ears. Pat said that they seemed to know everything about humans physically and how to make us well and how our bodies operate, but they do not understand our emotions and our feelings, which made them appear callous. Pat Roach said that she would not have actually known what had happened that night, and she probably wouldn't have even investigated it at all, but the fact that two of her children were adamant that they'd seen a spaceman in the house.